Welcome back on our skill development series. As we continue on the journey, we always want to start where we would begin, which is the foundation for us, which is the DISC assessment, which talks about our dominance, our influence, our steadiness and compliance, and how those scores align with our motivators. We're always good to start with this, to go back to our mission, which is for you to become the world's greatest expert on yourself. In doing so, we look to create desirable applicants through our opportunities, our processes, and our experiences. Specifically related to our objective, as we look at the motivator series and putting you in the best position possible, our objective is clear and always related to our mission or vision, for you to best understand your personal and professional preferences so that your actions align for superior performance and, most importantly, satisfaction as we relate to different personal and professional settings that we find ourselves in. So let's dive in today. Its objective is this: what energizes you? When you are in these settings, where do you find the most energy? And oftentimes when you expend the least amount of energy while also finding joy, satisfaction, and superior performance. That's where your skills, behaviors, and your motivators align. That's going to be the focus of today, and today's activity is where do we start to place some of your skills? All of us have different rank orders of the 23 skill categories as aligned to DISC. Once we look at our very well-developed skills and our developed skills according to our assessment, and we start to align those and experiences with our behaviors and our motivators, that's oftentimes where we find our greatest performance and, most importantly, our greatest level of satisfaction. We go back with a quick review of the motivator categories. Again, motivators are very specifically the why in what we do, and that's what drives us. So if we're in a situation where we know why we're there and it drives us because we feel comfortable, we feel fulfillment and satisfaction, oftentimes in response to our performance, we know that we're in the motivator category, oftentimes where that motivator setting is in the passionate or the extreme case. We also want to relate it to our DISC, our D, the I, the S, and the C, and how a person's work or performs in an environment. We have the 4 questions that we ask with the DISC assessment itself. When these align, and we spent some time in the last session talking about where we start to see those with our top motivators, when we find alignment is oftentimes where we find satisfaction and superior performance. So let's also then start to dive a little bit deeper into each one of the categories of what a low energy typically represents. Again, these are typical of these numbers that are assigned to different categories, what the low energy represents and the higher score is energized by. These are trends, not always true, but in many cases you'll find the lower the energy score, the more indifferent you are from a theoretical standpoint, you start to have a reliance on your natural instincts and past experiences for the answers. So if you start to be indifferent towards theoretical, that may disinterested, oftentimes might be what best categorizes you. If you find yourself with a passionate or extreme theoretical score, scholarly can be the one that best describes you with a high theoretical score because you want to acquire knowledge. You want the activities that help you gain the knowledge, the information, so that your ideas, your outcomes can be rooted in fact, oftentimes considered to be truthful or important information. As we move to the utilitarian category, the low energy score is oftentimes characterized as just simply being satisfied. It's a less competitive approach to accumulation of stuff or recognized accomplishments. You're just fine being part of the group, and the accomplishment, the accumulation of things or the recognition of it, it just is you're indifferent to the outcome of doing it that way. You simply want to do something for the sake of doing it well. If you're a higher score, if you're more of the passionate or extreme in the utilitarian standpoint, economic gains matter to you. Achievement matters. A real-world return on efforts, a return on investment, if you will, and a high level of self-interest. The self-interest in itself is meaning that you want to perform at your best and be recognized specifically for your performance. As we look at the aesthetic category, oftentimes being grounded is consistent with an indifferent aesthetic score. You're very pragmatic and tangible approaches that bring concrete and reliable results. You want the system and the process ahead of time, very much a governed, consistent outcomes. You're grounded in reality, if you will, and you're less of a dreamer. The word eccentric starts to define a higher energy or higher aesthetic score. You want to achieve equilibrium and harmony in the world you find yourself in and those around you. So the high aesthetic score, again, provides a great value on not only yourself, but the surroundings and all the things working together in harmony, where the grounded person, the more of the low energy aesthetic score, indifferent to it, is more works on pragmatic and tangible results. The social motivator category can be brought into 2 different regards. The low energy, the indifferent to the social settings, is often focused on personal wants and needs. Oftentimes, these individuals can come off as very self-focused and display somewhat of a suspicious attitudes toward the action of others. The high energy score, those that are extreme, on the extreme case, or even passionate, They oftentimes can be considered a pushover. They want to help. They're the ones that are willing to do things for you, even at their own sacrifice, to make sure that the common good or that those are working with find satisfaction before themselves. They want to eliminate the pain and suffering of others to the very best of their ability and maybe be overly exerted in doing so to try to help others eliminate some of the pain and suffering, even if it means they have to sacrifice in their own regard. The motivator individualistic can be characterized in this way. Those with the lower individual score, lower energy score with individualistic, oftentimes are very secure in what they're doing. They're removed from the spotlight, they're inward focused, they know who they are, and they're not necessarily looking to change. They're less focused on the concept of self-promotion. Those with a higher score in the individualistic category very much want autonomy and freed from others' ideas and protocols. They're unrestricted in how they want to go about things. Achievement matters to them. They want to go do it their own way to achieve things that they want to set out to achieve. Oftentimes these go with high Ds as well. So you look at the difference between secure and unrestricted, it simply looks at how we go about obtaining stuff and what type of focus is, whether it's an inward standpoint, which is oftentimes indifferent to the individual, more of a team-based, or the unrestricted, let me go compete type of viewpoint from individualistic. Our last motivator category is traditional. Those with a low energy score oftentimes, or an indifferent traditional motivator, are oftentimes defiant. They want to remain independent. They don't want to conform to the rules or the systems in place by others. They like their own ideas, and they want to be able to expand upon those and not be restricted oftentimes by the ideas of others that are put in place in the systems that they're in. Those in a very traditional setting are intentional about the situations they put themselves into. They want to establish routine, they want to establish order, and they're very comfortable in boundaries for themselves and others. Although at times they may want to set them, at the same time, those are the consistencies that they're looking for in whatever systems that they're in. Whether they're defiant because they don't want to and work within a structure, or they're intentional because they do want to work within the structure. This starts to define the traditional motivator category and what level you fall on in our 4 categories of indifferent, mainstream, passionate, or extreme. Combining all of this together, similar to how we look at the motivator category, similar to how we look at the DISC observable behaviors. There isn't a category that's better than the other. There isn't a behavior that's better than the other. All of these things are working together, start to best relate to your skills. All of us have 23 skill categories as defined by DISC. They're broken up into 4 different sections. The darker blue represents well-developed, the little bit lighter blue represents developed, the light blue needs developed, or moderately developed, and the white needs development. Whatever the skill categories are, we're going to focus on the ones at the top. So the darker blues are the ones we're looking at, knowing that the ones at the bottom remain in the developmental phase. At the same time, there are processes we can put in place to develop those. But for the sake of today's activity, what are our most developed, our well-developed, or developed skills, and how do they align to our motivators? So when we see that we're put ourselves in these settings, that align best to our dominant behaviors or our high-level behaviors. Where do we start to see these skills, and how can we start to leverage these as our strengths? Going all the way back to when we start to answer the question, tell us a bit about yourself, including your strengths and your weaknesses. We want to focus on the strengths aspect of our behaviors, our motivators, and our skills. How can I best leverage these strengths in a different type of environment that I want to put myself in? Again, part of becoming an applicant is putting myself in positions where I can leverage my skills, I can leverage the environments that I'm comfortable in, align with some of the behaviors and the energies that I bring into it. You'll notice it to the right of the skill categories talks about less energy at the top and more energy at the bottom. It simply means this. If I'm using this diagram and I'm presenting, I'm creative, I'm innovative, and I'm mentoring and coaching, or I'm planning and organizing, that simply just takes a less amount of energy to do. I find greater satisfaction in it. There's tremendous alignment between the satisfaction and performance, and it starts to align with some of the behavioral styles that are present. When you put yourself in situations where your motivators align with your behaviors, and you can utilize your well-developed and developed skills, oftentimes you begin to align your performance and satisfaction both in the personal and professional setting. Today's activity will begin to do this. We'll start to leverage our skills and strengths and define them, very specifically define our skills so that we can find out which settings we're already in or desire to be in best also align with our motivators and observable behaviors. which leads us into the next session where we talk about what type of environments, again, part of our assessment itself, what type of environments do you feel motivated and energized, knowing that we want to have tremendous output, tremendous satisfaction, tremendous performance with expending the least amount of energy. I appreciate your work on this project and appreciate your work on yourself as we go through this journey together of becoming the world's greatest expert on you.